This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our partner, Audible.
Yes, it is. So we are partnered with Audible. That means that if you are looking just to check it out, you don't want to put your card in and just take the dive. You can get 30 days for free on us. If you go to audibletrial.com/JATG or click the link down below, you'll be taken there. You can sign up for 30 days for free and just test it out. Like there's a lot of stuff on there that you can get for free, a lot of Audible exclusives. But what I really like about Audible is that out of the hundreds and thousands of audiobooks that they have, if you decide to purchase something, that is yours forever. Like if you decide not to carry on your subscription or you want to take a break or whatever it is, you can always go back and listen to that book whenever you want through the app on the internet. Doesn't matter because it's yours. So once again, you can get that for 30 days for free on us if you go to audibletrial.com/JATG.
Let me hit that record button. All right. If the internet gods are blessing us, I think we are just starting to come online now. And boom, we are live. Johnny and the Greg, episode 165, Greg. 165. We've been doing this for a while.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. And we have a guest.
It doesn't seem like that long.
Yes, we have a guest. His name is Matthew David. He's from Penny Blood Adventures, which is what, Greg?
Honestly, it's a third-party D&D adventure gaming. So we're going to do a big D&D episode tonight. So for those of you that aren't familiar with D&D, just hang with us. You know, we do this every once in a while. So big thing, how I found Penny Blood is I'm hosting an adventure for my family this Christmas. And so I was on the lookout for a Christmas-themed D&D adventure. So I go to Kickstarter and I just start looking around and I come across one. I'm like, oh, this looks good. I like this. Oh, and it's all solid. And it was, I mean, there were 30 hours left in the Kickstarter. So I got in just at the right time. I had emailed Matthew and said, am I going to get this in time for Christmas? And the answer was yes, I'll have the digital versions ready to go. And so I jumped on it. And then I started looking at more of the materials, was really impressed with the game design, with the art, with everything that you had going on. And John, I know that you have been digging into D&D for about, since we started.
Yes.
And you often have questions for me about game design. Like, what do I do? And I'm like, I do a lot of pre-bought adventures and then just kind of play off of that. But to have an opportunity to talk to an actual game designer and to promote a guy who's just like us, who's just the kind of Matthew's in northern Wisconsin, northern-ish Wisconsin, about Appleton area, I think I saw. And yeah, I just reached out and said, you want to come on the show and talk about you got a current Kickstarter going on. We'll talk about your experience in game design. And yeah, that's kind of how it went, John.
Well, welcome, Matthew. Welcome.
It is awesome to be here.
As we started this, I guess in the pre-show, I was immediately overjoyed when I heard the accent. I was like, yes, this guy's English. He's a Bret. And you had a funny story with
the whole mold, doesn't it?
Yeah. You had a whole funny
story. Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you doing in Appleton?
In Appleton, Wisconsin. Yeah, I've had so many people ask me that question because I work on emerging technology. That's what I do during the day. And I work with a lot of startups in high tech and a lot of companies in Silicon Valley. And yet I live in Appleton, Wisconsin, and nobody knows anything about what my day job is. And it happened because when I was like a little kid, my dad got an opportunity. He was working for a division of GM in the UK, and they said, "Hey, you're doing really good. You're a smart guy. You need to come over to Flint, and we'll train you." This is like the mid-70s, where GM had more money than they knew what to do with,
Mhm.
and so he came over for a year, and they said, "Oh yeah, and we see you're married, so hey, you probably want your wife and kids to come with you." And I'm sure he's went, "Do I? No, yeah, sure, yeah, bring them." So we all came over, and it was just a great year. Just hugely left a huge impression on me. And when I got to college, I'm like, I'm going to go to America. I'm going to go study in America. I'm gonna have it's gonna be an awesome year. And I get here, and on the third day, there's this girl comes down the corridor, and I lean over to my buddy, and because I'm 20 and full of morons and stuff. I said, I'm gonna marry her. And we've been married for 29 years.
There you go. Wow. What school did you go to when you came over?
UW Milwaukee. Yeah.
Okay, UWM, sure.
Yeah.
Does she know she's married?
She's an Appleton girl. She does. She does.
Okay, good,
yes.
good. All right, good.
Yeah.
She's aware.
She is aware. Yeah.
What?
Great.
Go ahead, Greg.
And you've been married for 29 years, and you've held on to the accent. That's also pretty impressive.
I actually, so I've lived most of my life now in the US. I moved over here permanently when I was 22. And I'm going to turn 52 here in a couple of weeks. And so it's just one of those things. And I think a lot of it is that technology I talk to my brother who still lives in London on the phone. We talk at least 3 times a week. And it's just it's one of those things where you can be far away from home but extremely close now. And it just makes things so much easier.
It's interesting with accents because like when I travel, if I'm anywhere for like more than a week, my brain is already starting to pick up the local dialect, and I get into it very quickly.
Yeah. So my wife hates it when we travel anywhere, like we travel to the south, or I was working with this team from Ireland for the longest time, and it's like you can't help it when like the slang starts coming. My wife would be like, "You please don't do that." You don't sound Southern.
Yeah, I try to. Well, my whole mom's side of the family came from the South, so so y'all
whereabouts?
Virginia, West Virginia.
Beautiful.
So like that's where we took vacations when I was growing up, things like that, and so like Southern came very easy to me. Y'all has been part of my dialect for forever, but I remember we were down there. Last time I was down there, I was in my 20s, and just visiting there for a week. I'm hanging out with my one cousin, and I said the word filed. I was be like, and I filed, and I went filed, and he goes, "You're turning Southern already." I'm like, I couldn't believe how easy it was for me to slip into it. So now I'm careful when I travel, because the last thing I want to do is sound like an asshole and be like doing whatever accent of where I'm at when they know I'm not from there.
I
don't mean to do it. I'm so sorry.
Can you guys hear me better now, right on cue, or is it still?
No, you're still
delayed. You sound good.
He's delayed for me, but whatever.
Okay,
we're fine.
Greg, you have such a way of adapting your voice to sound like those different dialects. So I don't think a lot of people understand that you're almost like practicing it. Like for role playing.
That came. Yeah, I think really it started off. I worked in a video store growing up, like in the mid to late 90s, and just doing movie lines, and like every kid nerd my age, we thought we discovered Monty Python, and so we're doing I'm practicing. I'm just doing lines, and that was really our D&D campaigns were just bits of Monty Python and some other stuff that we would throw in there. Like you meet the Lord of the Kingdom, and you're just like, it's like, what are you doing? Prostrating myself, oh Lord. And it'd be like, well, stop. And so I just dove into it, and then the movie So I Married an Axe Murderer came out, and we fell in love with the Scottish accent that Mike Myers
was
track, which turned into like all these other things. So I just kind of like all of my dwarves have a Scottish accent, which like many other players do. So
They do. They have to. They have to.
yeah, I mean, it's if I'm playing a dwarf and oh, all right, about man, here we go, and you just kind of throwing the brogue in there, and that's what I worry about is that I'm going to run into an actual Scottish person, slip into my like role playing accent by accident, and they're going to be like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" So things like that.
So I've taught my son because we're huge Mike Myers fans, and one of the things that I heard him once say, his dad was a huge influence on his comedy, and he used to say to his friends when if his dad answered the door, he'd say, "You can't come in unless you're funny," and just like sit in this really ferocious Scottish accent, and so that's just become a line in our household, like and it's like all of our kids and their friends that unless they're funny, they can't come in. And yeah, and so he like will do a Scottish accent, and it's just the most horrendous Scottish accent, but he just throws himself fully into it. He commits all the way.
Well, that's one of those full chest kind of accents that you just need to really get into and be like, yeah, cannot come in unless you're funny. Yeah. Like, it's just full on. But I mean, John, he was in theater stuff when we were in college, and that's how I met John. But I mean, John, you taught me my Arnold accent, like, because we would walk around the office that we worked in and just do Arnold voices. And that was, I mean, because like everybody was doing the "I'll be back" like to, but then you get into like the different register that Arnold has, where you just kind of go into the like more the soft speaking, and so you talk about the Arnold movies and things like that, and then we get really excited, and then that's where you bring in the growl.
Yeah,
and I took that back to my D&D group, and they're laughing their ass off. I'm like,
yeah, it's funny about the Scottish accent because Greg he ruined me from ever probably playing a dwarf because I can never carry these accents. And so I'm like, I can't do that because like Greg's saying they have to sound this way. So, but I guess we could always have fun with that.
They don't have to.
I know, but I'm saying we could have fun with that. You'd be like, where's your accent?
I think I've got it in the Monster Manual somewhere where you have to.
Yeah. That's in the adventure I've been slowly taking my group through Dungeons of the Mad Mage, which is this giant thing if you've ever seen it or played it. And in there's a two-headed ent, or Enten, which is this giant two-headed beast for people that don't know. And I gave he is a chef, and so like one head is like the French cuisine, like the very kind of chef where everything is very proper and nice, and the other head actually is a backyard barbecue kind of guy, and they fight over what they're gonna make, and it just turned into a lot of fun. John, I think that was before you even joined the group.
It was. That sounds like that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, he was cool. Anyway, this could go on forever. I do have some interview questions to kind of get into.
No, this is brilliant. I love it.
So I do want to know, like, because I've been kind of writing my own stories for 20 years at this point, maybe even more. To bring into D&D kind of games and really any kind of game. We were big into Star Wars. There's another game from Atlas Games called Feng Shui that I really liked, and that's like Hong Kong action theater kind of stuff.
Ooh,
it's a fantastic game. The system is super easy. You've got 2d6, so 2 6-sided die. One is positive, one is negative. You roll them, you take that result, you compare that to your ability score that you're trying to do, and that's the number you're going for. So
I love that.
Trying to get new players into any kind of tabletop role-playing game, because D&D, which we love, can be daunting for people to just jump right into. It really is.
Yeah.
So the simplicity of Feng Shui is just, I mean, they do have like an overarching story, but it's adaptable to any story you want to do. Like if you want to do like a Big Trouble in Little China kind of thing, or if you want to go back to feudal China, you could do that. I mean, really anything you want to do. The character sheets, there's really no character creation because like the template is there. If you want to be the karate cop, here's the karate cop character sheet. If you want to be like the Brick, the bruiser kind of guy, here's the big brawler character sheet. All your numbers are set. there's no mixing up of stuff. So really what you're doing is like, what's your guy look like? What's their name? Maybe do their background. So they're getting into the character piece without having to futz with any of the numbers.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely look it up. It's a Robin D. Laws is the guy that wrote it. And
cool.
I loved it. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
I love like researching other RPG formats. I mean, I'm just about to move into a new office space in our house, and we're getting a bigger room.
Nice.
And so like right here, you can't see is I've got like 6 shelves of basically my research and all of my D&D books. But then over here behind me, I've got like probably 30, 40 books from other RPG formats, and I'm always interested in how the game can be played, because at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. The rules for D&D are really daunting, and I played it 30 years ago when AD&D was out, and that's
edition.
just like it's just crazy.
So the terror of Thaco.
I'm sorry.
So when I say Thaco or Thaco, depending on how you pronounced it, just that whole nightmare.
Oh, it was but then I dropped it for like 20, 30 years because got married, had kids, blah blah blah. And so I was getting back into it like 4 years ago, and so I was just kind of going onto YouTube and just seeing what kind of like, hey, how to play 5e, and and you watch all these videos and they're like, just have fun, you don't have to worry about the rules and everything. I'm like, yeah, but there's like 40 plus books out on this. And so there's clearly some rules, and it wasn't until Wizard of the Coast about a year ago they actually came out with some great practical guides to just getting started with D&D on YouTube. And I keep it like right here next to me all the time, is the starter set from the new Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. Honestly, the best thing they've ever written. It was just like, if you've never played D&D, just read the rules there and you'll be up and running and you'll feel really comfortable with it.
So that's interesting that you got back into it about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And now you're doing Kickstarters and selling your own adventures. So how did you get into the game design piece? And what blossomed that and coming up with Penny Blood?
Yeah, so I've so 2 things. One is I've always been a closet game designer and world creator. It's going to sound really pretentious, but I wrote my first novel when I was 13, and it was because I was really I grew up on one of the very first books that was read to me when I was like 6 years old was The Hobbit. My dad read that to me, and then there's another great fantasy series called The Wordstone and Brisingham that is just it's a phenomenal series, and my dad read that to my brother and I. And then I got into the Narnia books. And then when I was 12, I read Lord of the Rings and just fell in love with the whole thing. And being 12 years old and having absolutely no other idea, I thought, well, I can do that. So I actually mapped out a whole world, and I actually still have all the materials with me, and it's just kind of like I look back and I'm like, it's just awful, but I wrote like a 300-page book, wow. That was my introduction into it, and I wrote I wrote about 6. No, I went to college as a creative writer, wrote 6 novels, and realized you can make actually no money from it.
That's true.
Unless you're a John Grisham, you make no money. And if you want to like have all your life go away, woo, become a novelist. And so I went into IT because that's the natural thing to do, and I love it. I love my day job. I've worked on emerging technologies my entire career, and about 3 or 4 years into my IT job, I was doing a ton of stuff with the web, and I was actually at the time I was actually writing back. I was part of beta tests for a company called Macromedia, which was acquired by Adobe. And all the cool stuff Adobe has now is because of Macromedia. So I was actually beta testing all their pre-release software. And while I was doing that, I came across this one guy, Joe Lowry, who was writing a book on this web design software called Dreamweaver, and it was still in beta. Version 1 hadn't even come out. And he goes, "I need somebody to help me finish the book." And I said, "I'll do that." And so I wrote 4 chapters for his book and got the bug. And over the last 25, 30 years, I've written 12, 13 books on technology, and over 1,000 articles on technology. And just so I've always written. And one of the things that I've always thought was, God, this is great, because I get paid for it and everything. And you don't get paid much, but you get paid. And at the time, I'm like, hey, I'm getting paid a lot more than when I was writing creatively. But I really miss the creative writing. I really, really miss it. And like about 3 years ago, my son-in-law was like, hey, Dad, you really need to get into 3D printing. I'm like, okay. And so this is a bit of a tangent, but he's like, yeah, you really need to get into 3D printing. And so I brought an Ender 3, and it sat in the box for like a month. And he would come over and goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe that you've not opened this." And every 2 weeks we would get together and we'd be playing board games. Like, well, okay. And so I opened it up, and I downloaded a few prints, totally fell in love with it. And he said, "Yeah, you want to go onto Kickstarter? That's where all the really cool campaigns are and everything." So I went on to Kickstarter, and at the same time, we're all like, every 2 weeks we'd get together, and there was like 3 or 4 of us, my son-in-law, my son, my daughter, and myself, and we'd get together and we would do board games. And I'm like, I really want to get back into D&D. So I said, look, when it's my turn to pick a game, can we do D&D? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And so we started doing that. And so I'm looking on Kickstarter, and I'm seeing that people are selling D&D modules, and I'm like, yeah, some of these people, they're making a lot of money from this. Pretty good. And so I went out and I got a whole bunch. I probably spent like $300 on like different campaigns, and I got them. And the one thing that impressed me was how basic they were. I mean, I'm like, I'm reading, I'm like, God, this no knock on anybody, because like honestly, the hardest thing is actually putting yourself out there and doing your very first campaign. I mean, it really is, and everybody should do it. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, I really feel like I could do this. And so I kind of like chewed it over, and I sat down, and I realized the day when I could do it, when I said to my team, like, look, I'm gonna come up with my own campaign, and we're gonna start our own campaign. And I came up with a campaign, and it had 30 locations in the campaign, 6 different storylines, and just like I put in the politics of the city and everything. We got down. I absolutely never finished the campaign because it was way too complicated. But I'm like, I think I can do this. So I did. My very first one was the Dark Nuns Church. And that's because I'm super inspired by Hammer House of Horror, and I didn't see any Hammer House of Horror stuff out there, and so I threw it up there, and the rest is history.
Well, I'm super impressed. Like I literally found Penny Blood on Monday, and I was super excited to talk to you, because I mean, I was scouring the website, everything else. I'm like, this is fantastic stuff.
I'm looking at the art now. It's really impressive.
I got
I'm on the site.
Yeah, I mean, I got
really impressive.
I got with the Christmas Chronicles of Winterglen. That's the Kickstarter that just ended. I'm gonna be running that on the 27th, 28th for my daughter who comes home from college, and she's got some friends that are coming home, and they said, awesome. Dad, can you run a one shot for us? And I was like, sure. Yeah. I mean, and I'm like, what am I going to do? So that's why I started looking, because I wanted to make it Christmas themed. And I love that you took, I mean, the basis of it. You got the 12 days of Christmas, And so it's a nice mix of the 12 Days of Christmas and a little bit of like Scrooged, or like
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
um the phantasms of Christmas kind of all coming
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away for people that might be interested in it, but I have been reading it, super impressed. And then also just like you took the idea of the 12 Days of Christmas and went, I can do something with that, and created creatures and modules. And I just thought that was great. So it's like when you're looking for inspiration, I mean, obviously the Christmas one came from there, but you've got you got a pretty big catalog on your website. Where does some of your
21,
inspiration
21
come
and
from?
counting.
Yeah. Where does that come from? Are you just looking at stuff and go, oh, I can do something with
So three things are huge influences on me. Just I mean, the obvious ones are like Lord of the Rings, and just the level of detail that's there, and also the level of detail that's in the Pete Jackson movies. But then I love B movies like Hammer House of Horror stuff, and my wife, like, she loves them too. So we actually have like so many, like on a Friday night, it's not uncommon to be watching a 1962, Christopher Lee,
I was gonna say
Dracula.
Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing.
Yeah. They're just so bad and brilliant. I love them. And the other thing is I love behind the scenes stuff. So like anything that's behind the scenes, and I'm a huge Stephen King fan. So it's just all that mushed together just seems to pop up these weird ideas.
What kind of challenges do you run into with some of the game design, or what, even just setting up and how do you overcome them?
Yeah. So John and I were kind of going back and forth. I think it was, or maybe it was you, Greg. Like my biggest challenge. The thing I want to bring to every game is that I know that it's going to be a group of people getting together, whether virtually or in person. So I want to have this fully immersive environment. And the thing that is my biggest challenge is maps. Because you can go down a rabbit hole, and half my backers want to use the games online, so you're kind of limited to the half dozen or so virtual tabletop map designing tools. And frankly, none of them are really great. They're good, and and I couldn't design them. I mean, they're doing something I can't do, and they've given me this tool that makes it much easier. But they're also extremely difficult to work with. And then on the flip side, on the other side, you've got hand drawn stuff, and which is great, but then it doesn't work on BTT. So that's to me is my biggest thing. And I have this. I over the last year, I found this great editor and this great team of people that because I have a really aggressive schedule. So I'll get out a game. I'm like, okay, you've got to game test this, and you've got to have your feedback to me in the next 10 days. Otherwise I can't incorporate it into the final game. And my editor and we're literally editing the games until about an hour before we release the game on the game day. So when you got the digital game, I had literally like 15 minutes beforehand finished editing it and testing it and making sure everything looked good.
Wow. No pucker time there.
Yeah, it is. To use a British term, it's squeaky bum time. And
well, and that's honestly, as a DM, maps are the hardest thing for me too. And I'm working on trying to bridge the gap, because to me, the maps are important because that's some of the most immersive things. And like when I'm playing with my family, they like theater of the mind, where it's like they don't like that as much. They want the minis that I've been, I've got the box of like, here's my painted box, which is this nice little box right here. And then here's the unpainted boxes. And then we pull those out. But they like that visual of like, where are they at on the battlefield kind of piece.
Yeah.
And bridging that gap between, there's some great virtual maps out there that people are making. I mean, you can go on Reddit and type in, they have, and people are just, yes, they have Patreons or something like that. But I mean, and certainly if you find a map maker that you like, give to them, because the hard work it goes into making a map is ridiculous. So You
Yeah,
know,
it
having
is. It
that
is hard.
between like pulling out graph paper and trying to, you know, map it out on a thing that's large enough to fit on the dining room table, that amount of time, I'm like, if I can find a virtual map, and I think a lot of people are getting to the point where rather than throwing away your old TV, like your non-smart TV, you just
Yeah.
take the stand off, put that right on your table, hook up your computer, and then you can have that virtual map right
Yeah.
there. So that's what the that's the bridge I think between virtual and live gaming right now. And
Hmm.
there are companies now out there that I saw one, um, like the mini, you get a disc and you can like imprint on the disc like some whatever the sensor is, like that's your character, and
Yep. Yep.
then
Yep.
you can like 3D print on top of it, or somehow they put
Yep.
that in
Yep.
there.
Yep. Yep. I
And then
saw that.
there's screen, you put your character on there and they've got the lighting and everything where you let
Hmm.
you, and I was like, wow, that's cool. How much is that? Okay, yeah, no, never mind. um
Yeah. Yeah.
so I mean, all these really cool things, but it's just not doable for me. And so it's like, what do you do? Like, how do you bridge that other than just say, well, we're not going to play, or we're all going to be on laptops in the living room,
Hmm.
or which again doesn't have the same feel. They want to be around the table. We want to roll real dice, which
Yeah.
in our
Yeah.
virtual games we just don't. Um, and then also for if I've got that file, that VTT, or just even a PDF, honestly, you can throw that up on your virtual thing too. When I'm on
Yeah.
with my, we use Roll 20 when we're on Roll
Yeah.
20, and then the group that we meet with every other week be like, hey boys, here we go, and that's, so I get that struggle. It is probably what kept me from gaming for a little bit. It wasn't until kind of COVID hit and we hit lockdown that I went, you know what? I'm gonna look into virtual gaming. And
Yeah.
we got the band back together, everybody that I played with in high school and early college, and it's been great. I mean, it really has brought us together again. So
I think there is so much. I everything you said, I'm so aligned with, and I think that there is so much potential for online gaming. But I think there's so much potential for two types of gaming, the online gaming, and I think that the software has to get much more sophisticated than it is right now. It's
mhm.
still it's a challenge to work with, but also bringing in that in-person experience as well. It's like, so how can we like blur the two together? I keep like hoping like the whole virtual reality thing, but I just it's still like it's ways away. And Apple's got a great device coming out, but holy cow, I don't have 35
Yeah, yeah, right. I saw that. And even still, like some of the more advanced virtual tabletops that I've seen, where it's like you're gonna zoom in and it's gonna be like an over the
Yeah,
shoulder view. There's animations with it. I'm like, hold on. If I want to play a video game in a multiplayer
yeah,
setting, I'll go play a video game in a multiplayer
yeah,
setting.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Part of the passion that I have for role playing games is give me the basics of the map and then let me kind of
yeah,
visualize a lot of that. Let my
yeah,
creative side take over,
yep, yep, yep.
and see how that goes. And even with Roll 20 sometimes, and we're, we use the crossover, we're on D&D Beyond, and then we import it
Hmm.
over to Roll 20 and it does all the dice rolls for us, and that's cool. I'm not a very quick math kind of guy, so I'm glad I don't have to do that in front of all my friends and be like, right, and then kind of hide
Yeah,
the finger counting or whatever. But that idea of like just not rolling the physical dice. I mean,
yeah.
I long for the day that I can, have the home game and be like, I'm gonna get my dice out because I'm a dice goblin. I've got
So
lots.
I gotta show you I just I treated myself. Where did I put it? I got this really cool new dice. Where did I put it? Oh, I can't find it. It's actually just it looks like a coin. It has all it actually depending on which side you have it, you spin it and
Yeah,
then it'll settle on, and you can do it for like multiple different dice types. And so because I love collecting dice,
yeah.
and just having the sets and everything is just my wife said I could because it's my birthday in a couple of weeks' time. She said, "Oh, you pick out your birthday present." So I immediately went on to Etsy and just like think bought up
Started looking at
like six
dice.
sets of dice. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm getting the point where I want the expensive dice. Like I want the rosewood dice. I want the a friend of ours at Gen Con, he bought they're almost like prismatic dice, but they're cloudy in the
yeah.
middle. They've got this translucence
Ooh,
to it, so like different angles. And when I was looking at it, I'm like, I don't know how we can read those. He's like, oh no, I can read them just fine from the angle that he was at, and I get over his shoulder. I'm like, that's amazing. I mean, and they were just
that is so cool.
beautiful to look at. And then he told me how much he paid for them. I'm like, oh, well, I don't, I don't. And here's the thing. I told myself, well, I can't spend that much on one set of dice, but I did spend that much on three sets of dice that I bought. So I'm like,
I
well,
know,
okay, fine.
I know.
But that's gaming, man. That's how it
It is.
goes.
It's and you know what? At the end of the day, it's not an expensive hobby. I mean,
It doesn't have to be correct.
this is, you've seen on my campaigns, and they're pretty standard. If you want just the PDF, it's $5. If you want it with all the extra files and everything, it's $12. And then if you want a book, it starts at like 23, $25.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not expensive. And I think, from that you get a whole group of people have 46 hours of entertainment. It's pretty good.
Well, and I've got new source material. Like the
Yeah.
creatures that you've provided, they can appear other places.
Oh, absolutely.
Winterglen is going to be like a town that we can visit more
Yeah.
than just that one time.
Oh, yeah.
So,
And it's,
I think
I
those gamers that have, they bought second edition, or that's what they learned on was second edition, and they're still rocking it. They're still playing second edition.
yeah.
Like they're getting their money's worth out of
Oh,
what
yeah.
they had. They're just going with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like the beauty of any good game is that it should be very modular. You should be able to take all the different elements and go, you know what, I like this, I like that, I like that, mix it together and do a little bit of cocktail magic, and boom, that's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Matthew,
when oh, you got a question there, Jeff?
I do. What's your favorite type of story?
Oh, so one of the things that I do is I actually have a list of story ideas that I keep in on my iPhone in my Apple Notes app.
Me
And
too.
uh, yeah, yeah, it's awesome. It's
It
come so far.
it is. It's
Yeah.
great.
Uh, the initial drafts I do for all my games are done in Apple Notes, and because there are no distractions or anything like that, I can just focus on the writing. Um, I I I've started building out. So I really like. I love doing horror because it's just fun. But I actually over the last 6 7 months started building out my own fantasy world, and I'm just kind of like experimenting with different types of genres. Like the new one I'm doing right now is on dragons, and then the next one I got coming is on pyramids. And I like experimenting with different genres. I love action stories. I love things that move things along. Yeah, but there's one story though that I'm just desperate to write. Is like a Mad Max apocalyptic kind
Oh,
of
Nice.
story. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I want to do that, but I know I'm gonna have to do like a companion book for that one because I wanted to have like a whole collection of vehicles. And I want to have one of the things I love with D&D is you can expand the rules, and and everyone's like, yeah, it's totally fine. It's all made up anyway. So I want to do a whole set of rules on um, how to run and kit cars, and I might actually take the new Bastion rules that are coming out for 1D&D next year. They've got this like new concept called a Bastion. I'm like, wonder if I can like kind of cobble that together, and instead of having a castle or a keep that your bastion is your Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's something I'm probably gonna have to write a companion book to support the rules, because otherwise my rules will be, there'll be like 1 page of adventure and 120 page from just rules.
When you say
So
that your favorite, sorry, Greg, when you say that
go
your
ahead.
favorite story is more like the horror, are you talking 1930s type of scary movies, or are you talking like Stephen
Yeah,
King, or are
yeah.
you talking Cthulhu? Like, what are you?
That's a great, oh, that's a brilliant question. That's a really good one. So I love doing the 1930s horror monsters. I've done some vampire stories. I've done some werewolf stories. I haven't done a vampires versus werewolves yet. That's coming.
Yet,
Um,
yet.
I, yeah. It's definitely coming though, because they're just fun to write. I mean, it's just, um, um, but I'm hugely influenced by Stephen King. I've read, well, I mean, the guy has written so many books, and I went through his list, and kind of came away realizing I thought I'd read a lot of them, and I'm like, I've read like 40 Stephen King books, but he's written over 70.
Yeah, really.
So it's like, well, okay, I'm like halfway there, but his Dark Tower series really influenced me. The just his classic, his like the 1970s, 1980s, classic Stephen King horror. That stuff is just, it's just a gold mine of inspiration, and so I love that kind of stuff. But I also love, like adventures, and just I love what I was just watching a documentary on Indiana Jones, and it was a tribute to Harrison Ford. Not a huge fan of the last two Indiana Jones movies, but I love the whole concept behind Indiana Jones
Mhm.
movies. Is that they're from these, like, 1930s, 1940s black and white,
Right.
adventure stories. And when I was a kid growing up, we had three channels in the UK. We had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. And BBC Two was just, basically where all the crap went. And so, like at 6 o'clock every evening, they just had silent, classic adventure stories for like an hour.
Oh,
And I used to
cool.
watch that every night and just be like spellbound. Yeah. I didn't realize at the time it was like, helping build a career.
when when you're coming up with like some of this, like the non fantasy medieval settings,
Mhm.
how do you think about that in terms of like, would you switch up systems, or are you sticking with the D20 because that's out
Uh,
there?
yeah, for right now, I mean, D20 is just so popular. I've looked at others like Old School Essentials, which is still a D20 system. The problem is that D&D is just part of the vernacular. I mean, and
Right.
and if you look at all the D20 systems, and there's a lot of them, D&D is like you put all the others together, and D&D is like 5 times all of them anyway.
Hmm.
And so I'm trying to minimize the barrier, as it were, to the story. And so, like, for instance, I was actually reading through some of the newer D&D books, and I'm pretty heavy on providing notes for DMs, because there's so many people that have just discovered Dungeons and Dragons in the last couple of years, and
Correct. Yeah.
just so many people. And so I try to, like, kind of minimize the barrier, and like, here are all the notes. This is how to guide your players through the story and everything. And because particularly with E5, it's such a well-established gaming system, and I was so delighted with the new 1D&D that's coming out next year, that it's going to be fully backwards compatible with
Hmm.
5e. Um, it just makes it easier to have people then focus in on the story, rather than spending 2 evenings trying to explain the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea, and again, that's a struggle for any DM. This
Mm-hmm.
this Christmas campaign, or this Christmas one that I'm running, two of my kids are, I think, with it enough and have kept up with it to go, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and one of my daughters will be a little lost, but they'll catch on. And then my daughter's friends, I don't know where they're at, man. Like, I don't know if they're coming in completely green. One of them is going to be bringing her boyfriend, who has said, "Hey, I wanted to try this." Okay, dude. So it's, and for me, it's the balance of make sure everybody has a great time,
Yeah.
and then you try to keep within the rules, because if he wants to continue on playing, I don't want him going to another group and being like, well, the first guy I played with said it worked like this, and some
Yeah.
other DM going, it doesn't work like that at all, man. Like
Yeah.
that's not part of it. The rule of cool can only go so far. um but like, did you, were you concerned like a year ago or a year and a half ago when Wizards was like, and here we're going to take away this open gaming license idea?
So I followed it, as you can imagine, with great interest.
Yeah,
And but with that said, I also have a background in working in startups and open source in software development.
mm-hmm.
And I saw what Wizards of the Coast was talking about, and they did have, they haven't, they've kind of downplayed it, but they actually did have a version 2
Right.
license. And there and there was a couple of things. One is, unless you were making 750,000 a year and declared it to them, which they made no statement of how you would declare them. Like, how would you even know? It was pretty ambiguous. But I think the second thing that went through my head was, well, you've got precedence already of having this open license for over a decade, 13
Mm-hmm.
years, no, 20 years, because that's when they brought out with the OGL came out with version 4, didn't it?
Yep.
If I remember rightly. And I'm like, this is just the worst thing ever for you to do, because you can't you can't enforce something when you've been giving it away for free for
Right.
20 years. And so, yes, there was the backlash. I mean, one of the things I don't like is the haters love to hate. And I'm like, at the end of the day, Wizards of the Coast, they're a business. They got to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all pretty happy paying Apple 30% for every single app that we buy. And, I mean, that's a real ripoff. But I think in this situation, I think the problem is Apple established what the rules of the game were going to be with the App Store on day one, and Wizards of the Coast were trying to retrofit. They were trying to put the
Right.
genie back in the bottle. So I'm like, yeah, genie never goes back in the bottle. So I was not at all surprised when they created the open source versions of the license. I was delighted that they made that move, and I've been really, really happy with the decisions they've made since then. They've had, like, recently they were coming out with some new fiscal items, and they actually delayed releasing them because the quality wasn't there. And I'm like, you know what? That's bold. That takes guts. It's very easy to ship something that's crappy rather than ship something that's really good. I mean, at least when you're the size of Wizards of the Coast, I'm
Yeah.
not at the size of Wizards of the Coast. I can ship crappy stuff.
The during that whole time, and John and I were having conversations, and John was still relatively new, so he's like, how's this, how this. At the same time, I was reading a book called was it Slaying the Dragon, which was all about the history of Dungeons and Dragons going back to Lake Geneva, like
Is that a
1970.
good book?
It is very good. Very descriptive, and in fact, it was the last. So I didn't go to Gen Con last year, but I went the year before. And
Okay.
I when I was talking with Weiss and Hickman and
Mm-hmm.
R.A. Salvatore, and like, I would, I'm standing in line, I'm waiting to get stuff signed, but then, I want to have some kind of conversation with them that goes beyond me just being a nerd and being like, oh, I think you're really cool.
That's
Which,
how I always act.
yeah, I mean, you're meeting these people, you've been reading their works for decades, and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
you're right next to me. So I want to have a meaningful conversation. So I said, hey, you know what? I just read this book. You're in there a lot. Like Salvatore's in there, like his whole experience. I'm like, I'm just wondering, like, was that book pretty, did it hit it on the head? It was some of it just, you know, grandiose for entertainment purposes. And everybody I talked to was like, nope, that was pretty much it. That was like how it went. So real interesting. And the idea that I was alive when TSR was taking this nosedive, and they're talking
Yeah.
about them just throwing all this stuff in a dumpster, just like
I mean,
everything from,
literally, they almost threw the whole thing away. It's like,
yeah.
oh my god.
Well, the first Gen Con I ever went to, which was the last one that was ever in Milwaukee, in the late 90s, and it was, or maybe it was 2000, but these giant dioramas that they made for gaming, uh, and they're like, they just ended up tossing them. And they did have a lot of their original artists come in and collect the work that they wanted to keep, but then the rest of the stuff they didn't want to keep, they were just tossing. And I was going to college in Whitewater at the time, which is a whole 20 minutes away from Lake Geneva.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, like, yeah, if I would have known, if any of us would have known that that was happening, it would have been us with like a fleet of trucks just to go and save all this stuff.
So you know who you need to get onto this podcast is Heidi Gygax. She's
Oh
Go
yeah,
Gygax's daughter, and she's writing her own D&D books now.
yep,
And I got connected with her a few weeks ago. So
nice.
you need to get on here. I'm sure she's got like a million stories.
I will try to reach out to her. I have been in slight contact with Luke Gygax, but that was kind of pre-COVID. And so because he runs a gaming convention down in Lake Geneva called GaryCon.
Oh, really?
Yes, and where I'm actually going next year. It's in April, I think, early April.
Okay, okay.
And GaryCon is great because it's small. I mean, Luke is getting big names of gaming to come in to be a part of this convention, but because it's at the Lake Geneva, what's the name of that place, John? The Geneva Grand?
The
Is that the name
Grand
of it?
Geneva.
The Grand Geneva, which is, a decent size conference center, but it's not like Chicago big conference center. So you're walking around, and then here comes Luke Gygax, or here comes what's his name from Scream, Matthew Lillard. He'll just
Shit.
they're just walking around, just be like, hey buddy, how's it going? And they're just really cool to interact with.
Yeah.
Todd Stashwick, who's he's got his thing, he's got a D&D virtual game out there that he live broadcasts, and then he was a captain, just a real dickhead of a captain, in the latest Picard series, Picard season 3, and killed it. I mean, excellent. He was there last year, and I was talking to some friends. They're like, "Oh yeah, we sat at a table with him and had lunch and just talked for an hour." And he's like super cool because it's such a laid back con, and because it's limited, it's like tickets sell out really quick because they're like, we can't
Sure.
fit that many people in here.
That's cool.
But yeah, that's a good one. I don't know where else I was going to go with that, but
Well, he
so
brought up Heidi Gygax getting her.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, Lake Geneva is, it's a little bit of a drive for you being up in Appleton, but definitely worth heading down there. They've got
Yeah, honestly, I was actually saying to my wife, said, you wouldn't believe, like, all this, started like 2 hours from where we live, and she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, it's like, it's like the epicenter, and
you got a big museum down there now.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want to go down, and they've got the new themed hotel down there now. And I'm
Really?
like, oh yeah. Yeah, it just opened. You can like
Where?
rent like it's in Lake Geneva, and it's a fully D&D themed hotel.
John still lives like 30 minutes from Lake Geneva.
Not only that, I grew up in Lake Geneva. Like
Yeah,
that was
there's
my
that too.
home.
No.
Yeah. So when you're telling me about a themed D&D hotel, I'm
Yeah,
like,
let me
where
find it.
exactly? Where? Are you looking it up?
Yeah, and that's, well,
yeah.
and John,
Griffin and Gargoyle.
Really?
John, the
Yeah,
whole rise and fall of TSR was in your lifetime. Like I think they started the year you were born, and yeah, it fell apart when we were in college.
Wow.
So what's crazy about that is growing up in England, Games Workshop was what grew, and that was Ian Livingston and Steve Jackson started that, and they started that they started Games Workshop, and then they started the Fighting Fantasy, which is what got me actually into role playing.
Mhm.
And Fighting Fantasy. I'm not, have you ever played Fighting Fantasy books?
I
I
I've
have
heard
not.
of it, but I've never played it.
Yeah, there. So as a 12-year-old kid, there was like this was a great way to have an excuse for reading. It's like choose your own adventure, but you can get killed in it.
Mhm.
It's just, I mean, and it's a D6 driven game, and it's just fantastic. It did really really well for a number of years. I made those two guys a mint of money, and they became the distributors for TSR for Dungeons and Dragons in England and Europe.
Mhm.
And and there's so the 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 uh the lives of both Games Workshop and TSR almost mirror each other, just how they went
Yeah.
up and they went down. And
Well, and once you get into those later years of TSR, hearing how they were trying to kind of like game the system of printers and publishers and distributors and things like
yeah,
that. And so much of it was like hedging bets on, because I mean, you remember the late 90s, it was new campaign setting after new campaign setting, just
yeah,
boom, 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 because
yeah.
they thought that was like what people wanted. But at the same time, as gamers were like, no, I'm like, you came up with Forgotten Realm set. I'm
Hmm.
good. Like if you didn't want to play in Kandahar or Al Hadim or something like that, and you're like, no, that's not my bag. I'm good over here.
Yeah,
Then you didn't buy it.
yeah,
Like they
yeah.
were just like, oh no, we're gonna put out Red Steel and that'll get people going. You're like, we're gonna include a CD-ROM with it, and everybody went, no, we're not interested. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that you know, from a business end of things, as an adult, like as a kid, I don't, and even if I would have read this book in my 20s, I don't think I would have understand it. But as an adult and knowing a little bit about good business practices, you're like, who thought that was a good idea? Who in their
Yeah,
world thought that was good?
I, yeah, I mean, it didn't. I mean, you look at, I mean, because in some ways, it's similar to what Marvel was doing as well, and that they were
Mm-hmm.
like just releasing like hundreds of comics a month. I mean, just on all of their genres,
Yeah.
and just hemorrhaging money. And I mean, I do quite a lot. But I'm like, I'm not doing what they're doing at their scale. And when you have a company of couple hundred people that you're trying to support as primary incomes, it's just not attainable,
Mm-hmm.
and just very expensive to run a business like that back in the 90s versus today. Like when I use Amazon for their print on demand, and
Mm-hmm.
so when I don't actually order any prints until about a week after the campaign has finished, and then I format everything. In fact, I was supposed to format the Christmas one this weekend, but I got sidetracked signing the next game. uh, but then I can have KDP just print on demand, so I don't have tens of thousands of copies of books sitting in boxes waiting to be sold or
Right.
shipped to stores.
Yeah, and that was part of the death of TSR was that live inventory, and then they made
Yeah,
they made buyback promises to their sellers, and then they couldn't cover those, and so then they got into
yeah.
printer trouble, and it was just ridiculous. But definitely check that book out. It was totally worth a read. Um, so we are coming up on time. We don't have to get off, but our listeners are probably like, "Hey, you're going on to an hour here." So what advice would you give to like an aspiring game designer, and what kind of like mistakes would you say you could probably try to steer clear from?
Um, so, uh, so I think that the first one is just throw something out there, get something out there. The person who inspired me the most, and I actually wrote to him on Kickstarter, is this guy. He's a dad. He lives in Mexico City. And he was putting out these one-shot campaigns that he charges $1 for. I mean, just the bare minimum, and that's how I started. And I just throw something out there, and because it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't I just recently I backed a campaign like 2 years ago for this guy to write this book on dragons, and he raised like $300,000, and he just admitted that he's spent all the money and he's got nothing to prove it, because what he was trying to do was try to do everything in the way that he thinks like a Wizard of the Coast does it. Well, Wizard of the Coast is a $400 million company,
Right.
Yeah.
and they have hundreds of people working for them. So don't do that. Like when I started, and to this day, I draft everything in Apple Notes, and I do it between my phone, my iPad, and my Mac. I had a really old Mac and probably the one luxury I've given myself is I bought a used M1 MacBook Air over the about 6 months ago, a little bit. But I start real basic, and use Microsoft Word or Google Docs, or I use Pages for the page formatting for everything, and just throw something together. There's so many tools that you can use as well online that can help you create, do the math of stat blocks and things like that, so you don't have to worry about it too much, but just get something out there and see what the reaction happens. And I mean, I look back at like the Dark Nuns Church, and I look at what I'm doing now, like a year and a half later, and now I'm like this is really cool. I like what I'm doing. I look back at that and I'm like, oh man, I almost wish I could take that off the catalog. It's like shit. But I have people who have bought that game, and they love it. They love like the macabre aspects of it,
Mhm.
and so you just got to get something out there, and don't worry about it. One of the things that I've been able to do is I have been relying very heavily on using AI to do the art. And I use Adobe because Adobe actually compensates the artists that help
Oh,
train
that's
their
good.
AI model. But one of the things I'm also doing, because there's different levels that you can of like success on Kickstarter. There's I've just got something out there and I made like 50-60 bucks, and I'm like feeling pretty good about myself. And then there's like $1,000 is the next milestone, then $10,000, and then there's after that it's like the people making 40, 50 to $200,000 or something.
Mhm.
I'm not there yet, but I'm at that next level. And so what I actually do now is I actually pay artists and I build a community. And that's so I have now an editor, I have game testers, all these people get paid. And it's like, just build out and expand as you feel comfortable and you're growing with your own success.
Fantastic. Well, do keep us in mind when you hit that 200,000 to 300,000
Yes, please.
mark. Would love to reconnect. We are going to go into one little section of the show. We do a thing called Polyjamory, which is we talk about. I am a person who listens to all different types of music genres, and it kind of freaked John out when we were in college. I would have like a burn CD, and it would be like club music, and then it would go to some rock music that was big at the time, and then towards the end of the CD, it'd be like show tunes and a cappella, and he was just baffled, like, how do you have that on the same disc? And I'm like, because
What is
that's what I
going
do.
on?
Yeah, he'd be like, the mood has changed. What's going on? So we have brought that piece of our history into our show where I just share a random piece of music. And if you're following us on Instagram or Facebook, that you will see that through the month of December, once a day, I have a Polyjamorous music song that is a Christmas song that's coming out. So with links to the bands. But so this week for Polyjamory is going to be slightly different because I'm not just doing one particular band or song, which is what I usually do, but instead I want to focus on someone who's on Spotify that I've been following. Her name is Punk Rock Jenny. Now you can find her on Instagram at punk rock _ Jenny. And what she does, and I'm actually I'm going to share my entire screen for this one, John.
Right.
Because what she does is that she creates entire playlists for D&D. So it is literally, so John, when I'm playing music in the background of our
Yeah.
D&D game, this is what I'm playing, is that she has gone through and just curated all these
Oh, I love
different lists.
this.
I know she has done so much work. In fact, I messaged her on Instagram before we got on tonight, be like, hey, we've never met, we've never interacted, but just to let you know, I'm gonna feature you tonight on our live stream because it's
Oh, she
just
got
so dang
Feywild.
cool.
Cool.
She has
Oh,
everything,
it's
like
so cool.
all these different, like, here's lively tavern, creepy tavern, calm tavern. I mean, whatever you're going for, down to if you're doing the Curse of Strahd campaign setting,
Yeah,
she's got all the way up to that.
plotting and planning. Oh my
I
God.
know, just I mean, so much stuff. And so, like, here's fantasy music. It's all these different great soundtracks and like independent people that have just gone in. So, like, if you were to go in
Wow.
and hit, what do we got coming up
Like
here?
one of the very first things, so I love listening to a whole bunch of music. I always create a playlist for the adventure I'm writing
Yep.
so I can like get into the mood. This is brilliant, though. I love
So,
this.
I mean, I'm just gonna go random, and what do we get? From Past to Present by Jeremy Soule, which is a Skyrim, which is a video game soundtrack piece. So she's just curated all this stuff, and it is all fantastic to just include in your games. For Honor, which is another video game. I mean, imagine that coming like if your players are coming over a hill. This is like Rohirrim kind of style of music right here.
Yeah.
So just fantastic, fantastic music you can include in your game. So Punk Rock Jenny is the Instagram account. And then if you find her on Spotify, go ahead and follow her. And she just has thousands of hours of playlists that you can include in your games.
That is then I've
That
got
was awesome.
Spotify up
That's
right
awesome.
now. It's yeah. I love it.
Yeah,
So
I do too. Matthew, where can people find you, reach you besides Penny
Sure.
Blood Adventures? Where else? Like Instagram?
So this is probably the one area I need most help on is I don't have Instagram. I don't have Twitter or X as we're calling it now. I have pennybloodadventures.com, my website. We're actually going through a redesign. New design is coming up in early January. Pretty excited about that. And I'm on Kickstarter. And you can just look up Matthew David on Kickstarter. I have new campaigns. I do 1 or 2 campaigns every month. I'm actually going to probably do another one. I'm launching another one in a couple of weeks. Actually, I was going to ask you guys about this. I've got 2. Like I was working on the outline of it today, and it's called Pyramids of Power. It's going to be like an Egyptian themed one, and I've got like 2 different book covers, and I kind of wanted to get your impression on what those are.
Please
can I
go
do
for
that?
it.
absolutely,
absolutely,
yeah,
go for it.
All right. All right. Let me and I know we're way over time, so I apologize, but can I share my screen?
Well, we're over time based on
Yes.
our listeners like.
Greg, do I have to allow him? Do I have to allow him to share a screen?
Well, I could
maybe.
I wonder if I can
I
put
don't
it
know
into the chat window.
are. Maybe.
Let's see if I can. Way too many tabs open.
For those of you that are listening, folks, for those of you that are listening on the podcast, we are now trying to get these 2 items up. If you want to see what these items up, please go check out our Facebook Live and our YouTube, which will be dropping usual time Thursdays at 12 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see now if I can do this.
All right,
just have
here
to
we
change
go.
some settings real quick. All right, share screen. Let's go share my screen. All right, so the new book I'm working on is called Pyramids of Power, and working on I've got like 2 book covers I'm working on right now. So this is book cover one, and the premise, as you can gather, it's all about pyramids, and I'm just fascinated with Egyptian mythology, and so like kind of meshing some Egyptian stories together. So this is book cover number one, and his book cover number two. Which
Ooh,
one do
wow.
you like the better?
Oh,
Go ahead,
see,
Greg. Go ahead, Greg.
I enjoy elements of both. Now, my wife is a graphic designer, so I oftentimes
Mm.
she's like, "Oh yeah, if you need services, then you can contact me later." What I like about this one, what I like about the bluish one, you have the Pantheon in the background, and I think that's pretty cool. I like the actual eyeball in the pyramid, and I'm wondering if you were to put the Eye of Ra in the iris of that eyeball,
Ooh.
if that might be a little something. What I like about this one is the adventurers in the foreground.
So, so I totally am right there with you. I just did one a couple months ago called the new Dark Age, where magic is being abolished, and I have
Ooh.
a bunch of adventurers on the front of that cover of that book, and yeah, it's a really good one. I enjoyed that. But I
I
enjoy
love
writing all of them. But yeah,
I love the blue one. The blue one speaks to me. It says like I gotta pick that up and look at that. I gotta see what's going on here
Yeah.
because
yeah, my wife
there's you
liked
got
this one too.
some real powerful things in the
Yeah.
background. The Pantheon that just looks it looks like it. Yeah, I would personally this is the one that I would
Yeah.
gravitate.
If you're asking for me to pick between the two, like no changes at
Yeah,
all, I would pick the blue one.
yeah.
You still have the adventures in the foreground. I like being able to see them, but I like what you got going on with the throngs of people going into the pyramid, or
Yes.
maybe they're
Yeah,
coming out. We're not really sure, but
we're not sure right now.
having them there, that draws me to what's going on in that pyramid.
Yeah.
Uh,
So this morning I woke up so I normally get up at like 4:30 5 in the morning so I can work for like 3 or 4 hours before I do my day job. And I slept in this morning till 6, and I was like, oh God, I've got to like format the Christmas Chronicles and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I got this really good idea. I spent the next 4 hours working out the storyline for this. And one of the things that I've learned to do now is I actually create whole backstories. Like I almost write as much about the backstories as I do in the actual story itself. So like one of the things that for the Christmas ones you'll see in the PD in the zip file that there's a prequel. I actually wrote the prequel so I could write the main story, and
yeah.
then I ended up releasing the prequel. But yeah, so that's why I spent like 4 hours this morning working on.
Hey Matthew, do you have anybody that is kind of like your round table where you guys just brainstorm and throw ideas at a wall and see what you guys like and how you can grow it? And
I talked to my wife a lot about this stuff, and I talked to my brother is like I've got an identical twin brother, and he's really into these, but I don't have a whole lot of people where I can sit down and just I've got like for instance like right now I've got like 50 ideas that I've at various different stages, but honestly these are just ideas. I don't know if they're really good ideas or not. I'm just right now I'm just kind of throwing stuff out and seeing if it sticks on the wall.
I'm volunteering my services. If you want to give me a call or text me,
I knew that
I
was coming.
this is something I enjoy that process almost more than the writing process. The idea chucking, the like putting
Yeah.
things together like, hey, I'm not I have an idea here. It's just an idea, but with that concept, that can like mutate that idea into that or yeah. So
I knew
Yeah.
sooner or later Johnny was going to be like, so, where do you have room for us?
I gotta say, this has been so much fun. I've been looking forward to this, like since you've reached out, and I've not done anything like this before, and it's just been this last hour or so has been just a total blast.
Yeah, it's been a great time. Hang on after we sign off because there is other stuff I want to talk about off the podcast. So with that, we are going to sign off. Thank you guys for being here this week. And John, you just want me to roll into it, or do you want to do your usual lines.
I'll do my usual lines here. Sorry,
Okay.
guys, I wasn't as talkative as I really desperately wanted to be. I didn't want that to mess up with the I'm on a delay for some reason. That it was killing me the entire time. I'm sure if you guys zoom in on my face during some conversation, I'm like, but anyway.
You seem good right now, but
Yeah. Oh, do I seem good now?
yeah, you do actually. Yeah, it seems okay.
Damn it. Okay. Well, then, Greg, take us out, and then I will finish the rest.
All right. So when you're around a gaming table, it's very important that you follow one rule, and one rule is kind of the paramount over the whole thing. And that is the rule that we say every week on this show. Don't be a douche.
There you go. For the Greg, Matthew David, our guest, and Johnny, podcast out, everyone. Have a great week. See you soon.